the second of the day. And we will be listening to another keynote speaker, Monsignor Carlos Alberto de Pinho Moreira Azevedo, entitled Making Use of the Cultural Heritage of Communities of Consecrated Life. He is the Pontiff Delegate for the Council of Culture. I won't give you more details about his expertise. He has a very high profile, and you can look, or you might have seen already from his CV. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Grazie.
Thank you. So beyond being the director of the steering committee promoting this conference, I also was entrusted with this task, that is to speak to all of you. So now, to save a few words, I'll say already for the translator's sake, that I'll just leave aside my first page. So the current cultural valorization or enhancement of knowledge production is a priority and a real access in the local and university institutions. There is today a very fruitful dynamism in research and knowledge production. So new ways are being opened by cross-referencing skills, competences, and contexts, and investing more in the field of religious heritage will have the effect of renewing history, the history of monastic and congregational life, and awareness. About communication, I would like to just tell you a few things of my introduction. So I believe that this enhancement of knowledge and of our patrimony as part of our spiritual heritage. So I believe that we need to value space, develop relationship between architecture and the sites of community life, to know daily life of those communities through their mobile patrimony and properties, to value the memory of a charism that is visible, and to do it in a concrete way, and the archive seen as a way to be faithful to the traditions of a charism, and then to see their life as a sign of wisdom and of service, and intercultural dialogue seen as part of their evangelizing mission. And last but not least, the enhancement and the valuing of their heritage as the importance of their identity. So, culture goods testify the spirituality of every institute and every group. So this patrimony has to be part of the internal vitality and spiritual reality of the community. The charism is the true heritage that we need to safeguard. In the religious communities, it is the immaterial heritage that actually enlightens matter. There is a set of traditions, liturgical, ritual, and recreational, capable of layering values and meanings regarding the objects, as well as improving them and creating new ones. The cultural assets that we have bear witness to the inner vitality and the liturgical and spiritual and devotional experience of apostolic institutions and societies. And the artistic and documentary expressions of this spiritual experience are quite evident. Their reading must be accompanied by the knowledge of the charism that would radiate in very visible ways through culture, art, and that were contaminated by some very intense spirituality. So the life of each community, faithful to the original plan or the original project, was able to adapt to the grammar of the different times and geographies in which it found itself. In the urban centers as well as in the cloister solitude of rural or mountainous areas. So detachment from the goods, which is something that is represented by cloister, is expressed through the simplicity of the objects and the properties, and also through the habit, the cloth that we choose for our clothes, and also the attitude, and then the instruments that can be used from the altar, the decoration, and the paintings. And then the beauty of code has affected all churches, sometimes because there was some kind of complicity, in other cases, it was because there was some kind of competition. Liturgical furnishing and a special splendor of the coal contaminated all churches, as we said. So the festivities enjoy the refined vestments and jewelry, especially precious reliquaries, and the entry into the orders of people from high society, nobility or bourgeois, brought goods of artistic quality, and friendly families offered paintings and valuable furniture as a sign of gratitude. Now, the relationship between architecture and the community lifestyle. Buildings, monasteries, convents, houses themselves should be considered as elements that testify the witness to the landscape scale of forms and lifestyles, interpreting through space the charism and the rule of the congregation. They are often important assets in the landscape, both in scale and in historical and cultural representation as well, because these communities are in most cases at the center of the sedimented relationships of their area, which makes the monasteries or convents engines of territorial belonging. So it is not uncommon for uncertain and unclear management or the alienation of property might provoke a reaction from the people of the local community surrounding those monasteries, given the popular affection and given the relationship that has been woven with the places and the peoples. So it's important to involve the communities beforehand in the decision-making processes that might happen. So the significant capillarity of the presence of the monasteries and the convents and houses in a given territory establishes a cultural and pedagogical service that bears witness to its artistic characteristics and creates a heritage that is marked by regional diversity, generating a natural empathy with the population. And this promotes groups, confraternities, associations, all united, all linked to relevant ties, through relevant ties and cohesion to the group or to the congregation. Their relationship also with civil and autarchic and state entities sometimes becomes a fundamental mean for the sustainability of the project, for a new project. Both the monastic and conventional premises and the set of assets absorb and preserve the founding narrative of the community, helping to promote a deep identity among or between the inhabitants and the space they share. The experience of the days is guided by the liturgical rites and reinforces the belonging to the monastery as a specific cosmos. Time is perceived there as a preparation for eternity and as a permanent dialogue with the specific geographical location, giving life to concrete objects and spaces. So the enclosures of the communities of consecrated life, so the walls of the communities of the consecrated groups and lives, the communities constitute and preserve stratified and plural the dispersation of these elements, but also the extreme unity and convergence. And the dispersion of this symphony of elements seriously compromises a symbolic discourse to the point of rendering it unrecognizable or reduced to fragments, incapable of sustaining a unitive narrative. And the valorization of spaces, even when the primary inhabitants leave the place, should not be forgotten. In fact, many orders or congregations had their own aesthetic canon. Thus, as the Cistercians aesthetic sought from the outset absolute poverty. The Cistercians, without displaying richness, had these big structures which were just great buildings. And also the Clares, I greet them because I know they're here, have been object of study, specific studies, in order to identify the architectural canon that was used in the building of their own structures and buildings. And they also helped the Jesuits with churches and houses that were organized in the same way everywhere. Also, the decorations, the icons used in the convents or monasteries of the Franciscans or the Carmelitans, Dominicans, etc., reveal some kind of specificity of the community or order. Third, the need for transversal, integral, and digital heritage approach. The best valorization projects are those which integrate, and we've heard it already here, archives, libraries, and museums within the original monastic spaces. So the interaction between library, archives, and museums can offer a realistic picture of the community's history, combining essential complementary information with a full understanding of the community's evolution. And this cooperation, this systemic cooperation, will offer the church and society the virtuality of cultural ecosystems that existed in the past and are still alive. Digital methodology is applied in the integration of different cultural assets. Digital description becomes a fast and effective aid or tool in several ongoing projects, as has been explained very clearly in previous presentations. The online opening of material that is considered convenient is a service of sharing, the sharing of goods, the sharing of evangelical value. And in this way, we ensure a future and a meaning to our religious heritage. The use of new technologies favors an integral accessibility to the collections and allows the diversification of the ways of using the heritage. So today, new strategies of cooperation with local authorities have been opened with the creation of valorization systems that use methods of fruition not only connected with tourism and linked to cultural heritage, but also as part of a naturalistic, experiential, and cultural attraction. So here, religious orders have actually a unique opportunity because they can combine the landscape dimension with the experience and the integration of their material and immaterial heritage. So the cultural complexity involves the history of arts, of craftsmanship, foods, the history of spirituality, philosophy, and theology. I will now proceed by division of domains. So just for you to understand that I'm just trying to use this kind of methodology. So I will speak about each entity separately: movable heritage, museums, archives, and libraries. This will be the order. So knowing everyday life through movable heritage. The interest of cultural history, so the life, the daily life, the everyday life, we spoke about daily life also in the presentation of the morning, finds in the knowledge of the movable heritage a very interesting source to actually use and exploit. The definition of the movable heritage of religious communities structures the researchers' work and their reflection within the framework of study of the monastic fact or the regular fact. So the characterization of the types of objects that are preserved in the religious communities demonstrates the vast variety and the uniqueness of their community life. Indeed, the movable heritage includes not only that which is closely linked to worship, that is, altars, liturgical vestments, liturgical objects, but also liturgical books and reliquaries, organs, harmoniums, confessionals, chairs, sideboards, as well as images, paintings, and tapestries. This patrimony extends to musical instruments, clothing, objects of daily use, the pharmacies. Let's just think about Saint John of God, agriculture, cooking, embroidery, especially when it comes to women's convents. Movable goods for utilitarian use are beds, tables, chairs, the kneelers, or paintings, devotional images, crucifixes, crosses, holy water fonts may have little patrimonial value in itself, but they show clearly the composition of a cell and how the vow of poverty was respected. And the same can be said for those that are considered commonplaces, the commonplaces of the life of the religious house, the chapter room, the common room, the refectory, with their furniture and objects. For those who inhabit those places, they take on a specific, significant symbolic status. So the conservation of these utensils of daily life and that are part of the decoration of the house, once collected or left on site, become a didactic context which helps both younger religious, men and women, and the visitors to somehow retrace the history of a religious family through the signs of their concrete experience. For example, a guest, a visitor to a visitation convent, describes the devotional elements of the bedroom or crucifix, 5 or 6 devotional images of the foundress, Saint Francis. Saint Francis de Sales referred to it as the good friends, the images of a guardian angel above the door. That was very common. For example, in the corridors, the walls were decorated with sentences, phrases and images and engravings. And also, well, today our pictures and photos are what images were in the past have the same importance, and that's what we have to preserve right now. So when it comes to this, I would like to invite you to register works and important facts, to remember the figures, the facts of Congregational House, and also to register all videos and pictures that are connected with a house before the house has been abandoned or disused or has been used for else or has been decommissioned, so that we have an image, an idea, a memory that is very close to the reality. And this is very close to the reality of the house, that it involves the music and the life and the festivities that were celebrated. And beatifications and canonizations are part of those celebrations that have legitimized by external realities the jewels and the important elements of those houses. So in those occasions, in those events, is when everything that has been produced is somehow showcased and new ones are produced. So now we speak about museums, enhancing the visible memory of a charism in museums. So the most usual way of valorizing the mobile cultural heritage will be the use of museums. current museology actually has evolved considerably. It enables cultural assets to become visible, and the memory of charisms are placed at the service of society. But then some monasteries, abbeys, and convents or religious houses can also be considered as places that could be presented as historical. We could think of a historical presentation of the house or the life of the congregation in that house. In a lasting way. And on the other hand, temporary exhibitions can explore these heritage collections and bring them back to life. Today, virtual digital exhibitions and virtual visits or visitations are also being developed. So we know that the art objects of a religious community out of context is like a Greek vase in a private window or in an antique shop. So traceability. Traceability is at the heart of the preservation and the future of this heritage. On the other hand, the increase of symbolic illiteracy when it comes to religion on the side of the visitors makes makes us want to develop a program, something that would help us somehow meet this illiteracy in order to make Christian art understandable, as well as our goods and as well as the cultural process and the social pluralism for all those who want to access it and want to understand it. Especially with regards to visitors that might want to go to a museum or exhibition. Another form of valorization will be through protocols with civic museums or conservation and restoration services, the academic world, societies, foundations, cultural foundations. We've heard a few experiences of interinstitutional dialogue with different public and private bodies or entities that would just bring about cultural projects. This makes a museum a space for dialogue between the religious order and the society at an artistic, historical, and spiritual level. The management model of cultural parks gains the ecclesiastical place, gains an ecclesiastical place in the development of territorial networks of cooperation and in the integrated exploitation of heritage. Third, the archive as a tool for the identity and fidelity of a charism. So, the material, the documents. This is those documents provide us the thread that allows us to follow the history and the concrete life of the communities and the religious family, their growth, the crises they've had to face, the expansions and the limitations or the reductions due to internal or external factors. And these documents and these collections preserved in the state archives or in the general aid houses or in the communities lend themselves to multiple analyses from paleography to statistics, from sociology to economics, from demography to communication sciences. So these archives somehow shed light on the history, not only of the Institute, but also of the objects, of the art objects and the places, the sites where they're found. So they have been often those places of cultural irradiation and of conservation, preservation of the codes, with many, many hours spent by monks and nuns, nuns more recently, but monks on their tables writing. And then after that, in contact with people, offering counseling and spiritual accompaniment. Back in the year 1500 are the more, so the mendicant orders born in the 1500s, especially the regular clerics, are in the middle because they value their past in confluence with an intense apostolic activity. With the Jesuits, they would say the Jesuits can be considered the last mendicant order, for example. That was what's said. And they knew how to do it, somebody would add to that. So education and its history requires also a consolidification of the archives. So the experience of years in the study of didactic material is very useful. So the future of the archives of many religious congregations is in danger. And that's why we need to call their attention on the specificity and the importance of funds and the importance of their history and how funding can help them preserve that heritage. Because if not, sometimes it's difficult to trace it back and to rebuild their history. So the archives somehow bear the marks of the place, of the site, and also the origin, where they come from, even though they are just stored, in the flea market, in the book area, or the bookshelves, or up in the attic. So we also have to fill some gaps when it comes to our knowledge about some artistic objects and some paintings that might have been given to a museum or to the local church or to another community. Whenever a house is closed down, for example, when a community is closed down, often the archives obviously have very meaningful importance, and they might be transferred elsewhere, maybe to a place where those documents can be concentrated. It might be something that we store in diocesan archives or in public archives, depending on what the community finds. For book, I'm sorry. Archive materials in the archives, and that is book materials, sign of wisdom, pastoral service, and spiritual. So books are an important element of religious families. So from notes to letters and manuscripts, epistolary collections, to profound reflections in the various fields of theological and scientific research, architectural drawings and plans, scores with music composed for instruments, large choirs, or for a popular audience. It is a very patient and secular work that elaborates human science by transforming it into wisdom, the wisdom of the things of God, into a profession of faith illustrated by intellectual speculations and sung by sacred music. Libraries hide treasures, treasures of the lived experience and the communicated experience through the written word. The libraries of the congregations often had different scopes and different objectives. They could be used to form, but also they were just like places where we could store ancient wisdom. Wisdom of all ages, with advantage when they are systemic and comprehensive for religious orders for them to be able to study. And they have been for centuries a place that witnesses the role of the Catholic Church as one of the most important cultural realities in or powers in Europe. Enhancing intercultural dialogue in the evangelizing mission. Next title. So the commitment to evangelizing mission has led religious communities to dialogue with cultures and peoples and has proven capable of reconfiguring expressions and to adapt, to adjust to the nature of the peoples in which they were established, where they settled. Let's just think of the consequences in terms of heritage of our presence in the mission lands abroad, objects from mission countries that have entered and have become part of the private collections of the communities. And when there's a profound, deep relationship, the current tendency in culture is that sometimes we consider that the encounter between the evangelizing missionaries and the populations of the mission lands are seen in terms of colonization, maturing instead the peaceful, constructive encounter that actually happened in many cases instead between the different cultures. And those documents and those objects witness that the houses of religious men and women have collected countless testimonies of faith lived in an intercultural dimension. This heritage has sometimes been systematized and placed in museums, which have broadened the horizons of visitors and have made them aware of how the diversity of expression stems from a single faith. And to conclude, the valorization of women's heritage, of religious women heritage. In recent decades, the search for elements to understand the female gender has gained ground. So, women's contemplative communities have taken on a particular characteristic because they create a female-specific heritage. It is enough to think of the art of textiles that they produce. Female religiosity finds in objects and spaces and in the material and immaterial culture of communities a fundamental element of study, a precious source. The archives and the libraries of those communities preserve studies that have been studied, texts, spiritual writings, devotional books that have been written by women and scores that were specifically prepared for them to sing. In women's homes, the ex voto were made from contemporary materials. And they show and witness the role of convents seen as centers of urban devotion. And the nuns devote time to sewing, embroidery, cooking, and part of the production is sold, but part stays with them. And since what counts is not the rate of productivity, but the quality, these packages, these objects are refined. Sometimes they are the result of years of work and are unique because of the devotion that with which they were made through prayer. And concluding, without knowing about this heritage, we cannot study in depth the life of the institutes and read in the global context of the history of the church, the link between the history of the objects, the history of the people, and the life of the monasteries and convents will be an essential database for us. The ideas are very clear. I mean, our ideas are clear. What we're lacking is the political will to define objectives and means. A political will that would arouse interest to evaluate the success of the decisions taken. And this conference will be a valuable contribution to the reappropriation of this memory, identifying the cultural expressions of the founders and the founding project of their charism for the enhancement of the heritage and for a rereading of the heritage in a testimonial key. Museography and archival and bibliographic conservation should not dominate the mystery over the mystery. They should be at the service, and they are at the service of the visibility of the spiritual, of the ecclesial experiences that bear witness to a creative humanity. Thank you.